High limit credit cards on the personal and the business side has become one of the sexiest topics in the finance and credit space, leaving many of us to be pursuing them for all the value that they're touted to have. To be honest, largely it's true. That having been said, we're constantly hearing different metrics about what it takes to qualify for high limits, different strategies and tactics it takes to convince banks that you are worthy of receiving such high limits. One of the few areas that are extremely important that we don't hear as much about is, can you get access to high limits with a low income, low to moderate income, we'll see. That's what I want to discuss from a professional and a personal experience. What is it like trying to get high limit credit cards with these various banks, credit unions, lenders, and institutions while not having the highest income? So to put context on it, income is one of those nuanced topics. When you talk about income in the United States, the reality of the situation is you can be making $50,000 a year in the parts of the South or in the Midwest and be living a pretty good quality of life. You make $50,000 a year somewhere on the East Coast, West Coast, New York, California, you probably live under a bridge. That's just the reality of it. So when we talk about putting context on what even a low to moderate income is, it's very geographical. In the United States, it is extremely geographical. When you're looking to get high limits with an American Express or any other institution, but we're leaning on American Express at the moment because American Express is built itself into a bit of a luxury brand in a sense of speaking. When it comes to the credit card space, you ask yourself what's considered low, moderate, or high income. It's very geographically based. It depends on where you are in the country. It might even depend on your zip code, what's considered low to moderate income. And that's something that you should probably do some research on based on your specific situation. You may be in an area or a zip code where your income is considered pretty damn good. You could have the same income and be in a zip code or an area where you're considered poor. So it's very important for you to first understand when banks are pulling your information and looking at your address, looking at your region, matching up your job, your industry. You may make a low income relative to your industry. You may make a high income relative to your industry. Banks are looking at this and underwriting in great detail. So it's important for you to understand and be your own underwriter first. I promote that a lot when I'm having these conversations and talking to you about these things. Gentlemen, you have to be your own underwriter on a regular basis. Otherwise, you're taking shots in the dark and allowing lenders to pick you apart without having any understanding of what they're looking at or looking for. So with that out of the way and having an understanding that your income is very relative to your location, let's just say based on your industry, job classification, zip code, area where you live in, you have a low income or a moderate income. What is the likelihood of you qualifying for a high limit American Express card? We're going to say 15, 20, 25,000 or above. What is the likelihood of you still qualifying for those limits? The reality of it is, it's pretty possible, but it's all about financial behavior. Believe it or not, you with a $30, $40, or $50,000 income can outpace somebody with $100,000, $150,000 income on limits to a degree if you have the right financial metrics and behaviors. I always talk about the core of every single business model every credit card company and lender has. Minimize losses, maximize profits. They are looking to take the minimal amount of risk based on their appetite, get the maximum profit by lending out the most money and getting their money back plus profit. How do they accomplish that? By setting up underwriting that will gauge your financial behavior. You having a high income is a metric. It can either work in your favor or it can be null and void. And I'm going to give you an example of what that looks like. If you are someone who makes 100, 150,000 plus, and in your industry and in your zip code or your city, that's considered a high income. If you have charge-offs, late payments, high utilization, your credit history is barely established, you have a thin credit profile, it's not going to offset that poor financial behavior. It'll get you to a certain extent. I've definitely seen it firsthand professionally where people have thin credit profiles, brand new credit profiles, and they're able to have a high income that they're able to put down, and it's gotten them approved and at a pretty decent rate. Yes, but I assure you, if you have enough negative financial metrics, you cannot wash them out with a high income. Opposite or same principles on the opposite end for somebody with a low to moderate income based on their industry, based on their job description, based on your zip code and location. American Express goes to pull your application. They start underwriting. Let's just say you only make $40,000 a year, and where you are, that's a relatively low to moderate income. But you have pristine credit. You have a dense credit profile of 15 or more active trade lines on your report. Your age is beyond 5 years or so. You have low utilization. You've had it for a consistent amount of time. You have comparable credit with other institutions that are relatively competitive to American Express, and you have $5,000 or $10,000, $15,000 limits with them that you've had for a couple years or more. If you meet these other qualifiers, your income will not disqualify you from getting comparable limits to other institutions you may have, or potentially getting a high limit with American Express out of the gate. Now, if you don't have comparable credit, credit and you have other good financial markers and metrics, you may start with a lower limit. You're going to probably be in a situation where you have to graduate yourself to higher limits. But you can do it even if your income doesn't increase along the way. If all those other metrics stay the same, and then American Express has now extended you credit and you're showing good financial behavior with the card they've extended to you, now you're in a situation where you can graduate yourself up to $15, $20, $20+ thousand limits, even if you have that same $40,000 in income. Now you'll probably hit a ceiling. American Express is probably not going to give you a $40,000 credit card limit on a $40,000 income, especially if it's the only $40,000 you have. But can you at least get $15,000, $20,000, $20,000 on that limit? Highly likely. And that's going to be good enough to open up the horizon for you to get more personal credit limits at other institutions at high limits, more business credit limits. When you branch out into that arena, if that's part of your goals, you'll get those decent to high limits. At some point, you're going to have to increase your income. But is it possible to get there at all? Absolutely. If you have the financial metrics, if you're DTI, this is a big one too. Let's just say that somebody makes $150,000 in income and they live in Ohio, or they live in Cincinnati, they live in Baton Rouge, Jackson, Mississippi, where $150,000 is pretty reasonable, pretty impressive income. But on a monthly basis, that breaks out into $15,000 a month. I'm just throwing out numbers. But they have $8,000, $10,000 a month in expenses. You make $40,000 in the same environment, but you only have $300 a month in expenses, $400 a month in expenses for whatever reasons. You are much more attractive. They may potentially get those high limits on the onset, maybe, depending on the other metrics, dozens of other metrics. But if all else is equal and their DTI is high and their utilization is high and your DTI and utilization is low and everything else is relatively equal, you are likely going to outpace that person. You have the potential to get better limits than that person will at some point in time. Because again, those high limits mean next to nothing with American Express and any other lender if you don't have other healthy financial metrics. I want to bring this to your attention because I don't want any of you who have low income relative to your industry or your zip code or your city to be discouraged in applying or striving for credit limit increases with American Express when you build that relationship out, thinking that you don't qualify. It's not true. There's a possibility once you work your way in that you can get those high limits in a relatively short amount of time. 90 days, 6 months, a year in, you can get there if your other financial metrics are healthy. You have to lean on one of the three major underwriting pillars: credit, cash flow, or cash reserves, and collateral. If you have one or two of the other and you don't have one, that's cool. Just have at least 1 to 2 of those in your corner and you can go into American Express and either instantly or over time get high limits even if you have a low income. Don't be discouraged. So all my pioneers, welcome back. To my new viewers, welcome in. I want you to comment down below and let me know, do you currently have relatively high limits with a relatively low income? I want you to comment down below. Do you have relatively high limits? Again, 15,000 or above in limits, even though your income is relatively low. Comment down below. Let me know a little bit more about your data points so we can encourage more men in our community to apply for these credit limits with confidence. I want each of you to stay focused, stay in motion. I'll see y'all soon.